We had fun talking about storytelling, and it's always a treat to tell stories. I'm just wondering if anyone has any questions about storytelling that you've got for either. Shirley.
Well, if you're talking about memories of storytelling, I was a children's librarian in New Toronto, and I love telling stories to the little kids, and the audiences got bigger and bigger as my storytelling continued. And one Saturday, I decided I would tell a story about from the 1001 Nights about Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. And when I was and Mrs. Brown, the assistant, was at the back of the library. The children were all sitting eagerly in front of me, and I said that I was going to tell the story of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. And I started to tell them about Scheherazade, except that it wasn't until I was standing in front of the children that I realized that I had only read this word, and I didn't know how to pronounce it. So I said, this story is about a woman, and then I said, and her name was Schenectady. And what difference did it make to the children? They didn't know the name Scheherazade. But the librarian at the back went into hysterics of laughter. And while I told the story, the children were all gathered around, she was still laughing at the back. And that's my story, about telling stories.
Yeah, no, it was funny because at my retirement, when I told a number of these stories, and I started about a family video show, and we're going to call it Yes, I'm a Librarian. But Rita Cox and Celia Lottridge, who are great storytellers, they were both there, and they just said, okay, we've all got to work on this. Like, we've just got to pull together all the different stories that have happened at various different times in the library. And for me, one of the other ones that I remember, and it's funny how things change so dramatically, because when I first was working in the library, obscene phone calls, streakers were big. Every once in a while there'd be a streaker that would run through the library, and people would call with obscene phone calls, and they don't happen anymore. Like, although I think there was a streaker in the reference library about a month ago. But you can't make obscene phone calls because they could be traced. But when I worked in the same library, Bendel as a page, it was quite funny. At our house, we'd had a lot of obscene phone calls. I even had a woman who was calling me pretending to be a school nurse and asking, really intimate questions of a kid in, grade 8, which was pretty surprising. And it was just that she said that she was a school nurse and was asking the most intimate details of my life. And so then I summoned up the courage to go and visit the school nurse and give some of the answers to these intimate questions, and I was really embarrassed. And I opened the door to the school nurse's office and spouted out my answers, and she didn't have a clue what I was talking about. The principal was called in, and the police were called in, and everyone in our house and the school, everyone knew that there was a woman on my paper route that was decided that was making these obscene phone calls. Just meant that when I was delivering papers and it was a hot little thing. There was a woman on my group that wanted me, but I didn't know how to deal with obscene phone calls because the police said the last thing that you should do is, get upset, get engaged, but you have to frustrate the caller. And frustrating them is the best way to deal with it. And there's this wonderful woman who was the assistant branch at Marjorie Taylor who would blush at anything. So I had said to her, the best way to answer an obscene phone call is just to pretend you can't hear them or ask them to repeat what you were saying. And on that Saturday morning, I'll always remember being at the circ desk when this call came in, and Marjorie Taylor picked up the phone, and she could see her just go beet red, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry I didn't catch that. Could you repeat that?" And that went on, and no, I'm sorry, I have to speak more slowly. And the entire staff is now around Marjorie, you know, cheering her on as she's saying, I'm sorry, no, I didn't catch that. You'll have to speak more slowly. And it was, oh, could you speak up a bit? It was just absolutely hilarious watching this woman. And it got to the point where he was speaking so slowly and so loud that everyone in the library could hear the obscenities that were being said into the phone until he finally hung up in frustration, which was the point. And I think Marjorie will still remember that and be grateful to the fact that thanks to this little guy who was a page, who had experience with obscene phone callers, she was able to thwart at least one obscene phone caller at the library. So there's tons of stories, I'm sure many of you have your own stories, but it's just fun to remember them. And that's one of the great things with storytelling is, as one hears stories, it's the sharing of experience and making you think of your own experiences. And just also say, with all the traditional tales, as Toronto is such a multicultural area, it's wonderful to work with children and tell a story, and they think of one that's very similar from their own culture. So that children's stories are universal, and we've got stories in every culture that are, you know, we want to share them, and that's the great thing with storytelling.
If there are no more questions,